Burst is funded in part by a Big Sky Film grant from the Montana Film Office. All right, hi everyone. This is Josh Hughes here with Add-A-Tudez Entertainment Company, and we decided to show a little bit more behind the scenes of what goes into making and pitching a game today. So today I'm going to show you what's called a pitch deck. A pitch deck is your quick form pitch for your game and why it deserves funding. It's usually made in either PowerPoint or in this case I made this in Google Slides. And also, since it's an online Google Slides version, I actually used some footage from the current prototype of the game in it. So you'll see footage like this right throughout it. Keep in mind that this is prototype footage and that it will be very different by the time that the final game launches. It'll be much prettier, much more detailed. We're working on that now and hope to reveal that to you soon. But anyways, the whole idea behind this is to show people what your game concept is, why it's fun, and why it can meet the need of securing more sales than it needs to make back the money that it was used to fund it. Which I know I kind of made that a word salad, but it'll make more sense when we get through this presentation. So usually the first slide, you want to really capture people's attention and give them the idea of your game, which in the case of Burst is this celebration of fireworks and music. So you get this really loud, explosive, in-your-face look at what the game could look like. Then the first thing you want to do is explain to people how the game is played. For us, it's kind of become easier to just tell people that it's Guitar Hero or Dance Dance Revolution in the sky. And we talk about how, players hit the buttons when they hit the score zone, and that helps increase their score, and that they can also swap between periodic table elements to change colors of the explosions. And that also if you have a long chain of explosions back to back and you're constantly swapping colors mid-chain, that will actually increase your score a lot faster. And if you look at GIF is showing our old UI. So we are actually going to debut a new UI sooner than later, probably within a month. We're going to show you the new UI that shows off the colors that you currently have selected much better. And then we cover the Flurry of Fireworks. This is the same GIF that was in the background of the first slide. Basically, when players do really well in the game, they get what's called a Pyro Coin, and that's a placeholder name. By the time the game launches, we might have a different name for it. But you can cash it in at any time, and it spins the environment 360 degrees. During that spin, you spam all the buttons to create this Flurry of Fireworks. And you can either do it to show off, or if you're in a near failing state, you can do that to save yourself from a near failing state. But either way, it's an additional way for players to show off in the game. And again, if you're going to keep the comparison going to like Guitar Hero or Dance Dance, it'd be like our equivalent of Star Power. We also talk about the gameplay loop. A gameplay loop is the basic things that a player does in your game. So for instance, if we're talking about a fighting game, the loop would be they pick their character, their opponent picks their character, they have their fight, one of them is declared a winner, and then the process repeats again. That's a gameplay loop. In the case of the gameplay loop for Burst, we use the character Bop to kind of run that. Bop is a bird of paradise who won a fireworks stand in an online auction and didn't realize at the time that he would need product and friends to run it. So he casts you as his friend to put on fireworks shows to impress the company behind the fireworks stand to get him more product, which is like songs and explosion colors and explosion types. So you go play a song, you do well, you unlock additional songs, color types, and explosions, and then repeat the process. And that's our gameplay loop. So anytime you're designing any kind of game, keep in mind what the gameplay loop is. Another example, to put a very simple version, would be like checkers. Player 1 takes a turn, then player 2 takes a turn, then the process repeats. That's a gameplay loop. And that when you think about what your gameplay loop is, that can help you figure out where the fun is and what's the behavior that you want your player engaging in so that they're having fun and want to come back and do it again. Then you have a slide that shows your key team members, and it doesn't have to be your entire team, but key people that are helping out on the project. So here we have my mom, brother, and I, because we're kind of heading up the company, our 3D and 2D art director, our senior programmer, and one of our programmers who's also involved with quality analysis. It gives the people looking at you an idea of what you're going through and what your team is, and whether or not you're capable of pulling off what you claim you can. Then you also have to talk about what kind of platforms you're developing for. We're developing Burst in Unity 3D, and we are PlayStation and Xbox certified. And then if people looking us over want to ask additional questions, we can also cover that we're developing on PC first and then pushing to those other two platforms. And that burst is easily modified to be deployed on mobile. Then you also want to talk about your target players. And sometimes with a game, this could primarily involve like an educated guess on your part. Although in our case, we actually do have hands-on experience. We've taken prototypes of Burst to several events around our region and let everyone from little kids all the way to adults play it. And that's given us a lot of feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like. And that's important to understand because people get this idea in their head that, oh, you know, once you get good enough at game design, you can just immediately shoot out a really excellent game idea and it works first try. And that's a fallacy. It does not work like that. Actually, what goes down is you come up with a general idea of something that could be fun, you prototype it and get it in front of people and let them play it and see what resonates and what doesn't. And this is true for beginners all the way to people who've been making video games their whole life. And once you get an idea of what's working, what doesn't, you play up what works and either remove or fix what doesn't, and you eventually arrive at a good game that way. And so if you can, get people playing, testing your prototype, but at the bare minimum, you want to be able to show that you're aware of who your target audience is. Don't just say, oh, I want to sell to gamers. Say, I know that this will resonate with people who like music or people in these age groups. And be aware that your target audience might be bigger and more varied than you think. For instance, a lot of people who go into developing games think that the only game players out there are teenage males, and they are actually a fraction of the game players out there. Over 60% of all people who play video games are over the age of 18, and 43%, just shy of half of all gamers, are women. So keep that in mind, that it crosses all age, gender, racial barriers, cultural barriers, and that you want to really think out who your target players are and realize that they may be people that you have never even initially thought of, because that will not only help you shape your pitch, it could help you shape your game design as well. And sometimes if your game has unique stuff to it, you may need to include slides that explain that. In our case, we're talking about inclusion of STEM content here because people look at the fact that we have the periodic table of elements and that they actually correspond to the color explosions, and they're like, oh, this must be an educational game. And we include this slide to say not exactly. We're actually aiming at for gamers to play in their own fun and their own free time. It just happens to have educational content included in the game. But if people want to use it in classrooms, that's totally cool. We're fine with that. But that's not our target audience. Our target main audience is people who want to play this of their own volition in their own free time, the way they would play Guitar Hero or Dance Dance. So it's sometimes important to explain stuff like this because you need to be aware of the people you're pitching to and what preconceived notions they may be coming in with, especially considering that in our industry, most people think that there's a very strong separation between normal games and educational games, and you're either one or the other. And if you blur that line, you need to come out and explain that and make sure that you don't accidentally make them think you're one thing when you're not. You also need to include information on what your state of play is, like where you're currently at. We're currently playable in late alpha, early beta. We require art polish. We're currently using the Montana Film Office grant money to do that. And we're in current testing with players for UI feedback, which has actually led to that, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be showing you the new user interface soon. We're very excited about that. And we're seeking funding to polish, complete, and ship the game, hopefully within the next year. And then you also want to talk about different hooks your game has. In our case, we feature top music from different groups that have gone viral or that kind of thing. And by the way, when you're featuring music in your game or anyone else's creation, get permission. Every artist we have has given us permission to use their music in our game, including Superman, who's a Native American rapper, Prima Nocta, which is a band from Belgium that performs rock kind of music but using traditional instruments, and Quaff, a band from Japan that they call themselves samurai rock, but they mix rock and kabuki theater together. And then also, if you have anything to play up about your project, be loud and proud about it. We have an entire slide talking about how we're a winner of the Montana Big Sky Film Grant. And that's a big thing, especially since we're the first video game ever to be supported by that. That shows people looking at you that you've already got traction and that you are able to wow people and get that kind of support. And then you also want to show what your milestones are, what you think you will be doing once you get money. So we think that once we get fully funded, that within a month we'll have a polished vertical slice A vertical slice is a tiny chunk of your game that looks like it was ripped out of a retail product. And it gives the funders an idea of what the overall game will look like. When you're developing prototypes and stuff, start with prototypes, but once you start to find the fun, think about developing a vertical slice so that when you show other people, it gives that idea of what it looks like. So for instance, that 3D model of Bop there, which is actually going to be the 3D model in the game, is an example of us kind of showing a little bit of the vertical slice, showing where the art style is going and the feel of the game is going. And then within month 2, we'll begin work on the 3D main menu and customizing your own fireworks shells. We'll also have, 3D main menu working by month 5, custom shell mode finished by month 7, and the tutorial completed. In month 9, we'll have final QA passes, and I'm kind of speeding through that. But if you need to, you can pause the video and read that. But the whole point is to show people that you know that you have a plan laid out about how long it'll take you and what your main markers will be. Sometimes, especially if you're asking for a lot of funding, they will actually break up the funding based on these milestones, saying, okay, by the end of month 1, we want the polished vertical slice. Once you get that to them, they give you the next check, and then they want the stuff for month 2 done, and then the next time they want the stuff for month 5 done. So you're constantly doing milestones along the way, which is kind of typical in the game industry, especially for larger projects. Then you just show your staffing needs. This is just kind of continuing showing that you understand how much you need and what you need. So like 1 game designer, 4 programmers, 4 3D artists, 2 2D artists, 1 sound engineer, 2 QA testers, 1 person to handle our paperwork, and 1 person that's bookkeeper and operations. That just shows that you've actually thought this out. You didn't just pick a number out of the sky and ask it and hope that you get a check. Now this slide isn't in our actual pitch deck for Burst. This one I made just for this presentation, because this is information you need to know behind the scenes, and your people looking at you, if they're used to funding in the game industry, they're likely aware of this too. But first of all, you need to have comparative research in mind. So you need to know about other games in your genre, like in our case, music games or puzzle games. And how much do they typically sell? So we list a couple examples, like Beat Saber sold 100,000 copies in its first month of sale. Audio Surf, which is a music game on Steam, sold 1 million copies. Super Hexagon sold 45,000 copies. And the reason this is important is because you need to think about, when designing your budget for your game, you need to think about what we call the break even. What that means is if you need this much money to develop your game, then you need to sell at least this many copies to, break past that funding amount and start to make a profit. So you need to show that your break-even amount is relatively sane compared to what a game typically sells in your genre. In our case, Burst's break-even is about 15,000 copies. So as you can see from those examples there, we should be able to blow past that and make a decent profit, which means that people looking to invest in us feel more safe about doing so. And also I included here a typical game sale breakdown. This is for games that are typically sold in a brick and mortar store like GameStop or Walmart. It is slightly different for games that are sold online, and it should be noted more games are being sold online now, but this still gives you an idea. Out of a typical game sale, 20% goes to the console maker or platform makers such as like Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft. 20% goes to the brick and mortar retailer such as Walmart or GameStop. 15% goes to pay for the marketing campaign for the game. 15% goes to people like me and my team, the developer. And 30% goes to the publisher. That could be Electronic Arts or Activision or Sony or Raw Fury. It depends, whoever the publisher is for the game. So that's kind of the basics of making a pitch deck, and that's kind of the stuff we have to go through behind the scenes to get funding for a video game and to get it out there and get it, hopefully, a publishing contract sometime soon. Thank you very much, and let us know what you think.